Welcome back to Benny's Custom Works. Today we're going to be fabricating a stainless 3-inch exhaust for this Y31 Nissan Cima. Someone will correct me saying it's Cima. We have it on good authority that it's Cima. Cool thing about this car though, it looks pretty standard. Obviously it's pretty dirty because we've finally got rain in Australia, yay. It's got an RB25 in it and it's also got an R33 manual 5-speed transmission in it. We originally purchased this vehicle to part it out and use the running gear in Adam's blue S13 Silvia drift car. However, when we got it, we had a bit of a look at it and realised pretty quickly how well the conversion was done and probably that it deserved to live on. The body's a bit rough. Paint-wise, the paint's pretty sunburnt. It's had a cover on it, it's rubbed the paint through. So the goal long-term for this thing is to just give it a bit of a freshen up. But it's actually been out of rego for quite a while, so one of the things that really needed to be done before we could even get it re-registered was make the new exhaust. Previously this exhaust system that was on it was a hodgepodge of the original Y31 exhaust and bits of an R33 exhaust. I mean, it served its purpose, but it did leak and there's no way that it would have got a re-rego with that exhaust, well, legitimately anyway. So we're going to jump into it today and make a stainless 3-inch exhaust. We've got a prefabricated front pipe, which we do have to still modify anyway. The goal is to tuck it right up as high as we can because this thing does sit pretty low. It's got little 15-inch wheels and tyres on it and it's slammed on coilovers. So yeah, we're going to get under it and make up our exhaust and hopefully we'll be mooing in no time. Factory, a lot of Nissan exhausts actually bolt to this transmission crossmember. There's two little studs here. So we just made a quick little plate out of 40 by 3 mil thick plate. I think it's 40 mil or 30 mil, can't remember exactly. But we're just gonna tie a bit of exhaust hanger material, just some 10 mil stainless round bar. We're just gonna weld to that and then straight to this flange, which will then tie all this together. Obviously this is hard mounted to the transmission and the engine and the transmission are obviously hard mounted together. So you probably wouldn't want to isolate this on a rubber mount. Nissan do for some reason, I'm not sure why, because to me, this should all be tied together hard. I mean, obviously they probably know better than me, but my theory is that you would want it solid mounted together so it all moves the same mount because there's no flex joint up there. If there was a flex joint, there'd be a different story, but this is solid the whole way. So my theory is that this will actually stop the turbo rattling loose. It is just a theory, so we'll see what happens, but we'll zip the rest of that dump pipe up. I'm just going to MIG everything today. I was going to TIG it, but it's going to be just too time sensitive. And I mean, as much as this is a cool car, I don't want to spend 19 hours making a fully TIG exhaust, and I'm not that good on the TIG anyway. So we'll zip it up with the MIG and call it done. got our center section made, which goes all the way from our off the shelf, which is no longer off the shelf front pipe, to over the diff. This is an IRS car, but it still actually runs the exhaust over the diff for some reason. I'm not sure why Nissan have done that, but we've followed the same path to maintain the ground clearance. The exhaust the whole way is actually higher than these rails, which I'm really happy about. So the old exhaust system actually hang really low. We've cut 35 mil out of this front pipe, and that's obviously raised this whole section up here, and then that's given us heaps of clearance. As I look, it is a touch below, but it's so minuscule compared to the old thing. It was way low, so yeah, super happy that we've been able to tuck that right up. Now that we've made this whole center section, or tacked it together, I'm going to pull it out and completely weld the whole thing. The reason I want to do that is because potentially things could move here and there by welding the whole thing up. And if we make the whole thing, if we tack the whole thing together and then pull it off and weld the whole thing up, potentially the muffler's going to be in the quarter panel or in the spare wheel well, because 5 mil here is probably about 150 mil at that end. So I'd rather make this centerpiece and then pull it out, weld it up, and then make that rear section. The other thing, I had a bit of a fail. I've only actually got 2 3-inch flanges. We need 3 for this car, so we do have another one coming, but we're still going to make the whole thing today. And I'm actually just going to tack the back section to the other flange that we've got, and then when the new flange comes, I'll just trim 10 mil off and then weld the flange on so that we can make the whole system today. And it just means we won't be able to bolt the back section on today, but that'll still let us fit everything else, make the hangers, do all the welding today apart from welding that flange on. So it'll be a 20-minute job to finish it up another day, but we'll probably do the whole thing today, and then that'll be us done on camera, and then I'll just zip it up when it turns up. But enough chit chat, we're going to pull this center section out and then weld it all back up. Can we get it out? Yes, we can get it out. A lot of you PPE experts probably would have noticed before that I wasn't wearing gloves or a long sleeve. In the tacking situation, I don't normally abide to those rules. However, when we're doing consistent welding in a similar space, you're obviously going to get your arms and your hands burnt. So obviously, when we're doing the big welding, we jump onto the more serious PPE. So PPE is called PPE. It's like personal protection. So use your discretion. Everyone's different. I don't need a rant in the comments or a lecture, but let's get welding. We've got our center section all in. It's done final fit now. We've got it all bolted up. We've got sealant on the flange, and we've also got sealant on our front pipe. Unfortunately, because I didn't have all the flanges we need, I'm really not comfortable with finalizing this rear section until we have that flange. Like I said before, 2 millimeters at that end is probably 30 millimeters at that end. So we've mocked all the piping up. I've got it all tacked to the back side of the muffler. The tip side, we've basically just split a 90 and 180'd it to get that sort of offset swivel. A bit of a favorite of mine, that little technique. But I think we're just going to call it for the day. For the most part, you guys have seen how to make an exhaust. I'm also by no means an exhaust expert. I probably should have TIG welded all of that, but we'd still be TIG welding that front pipe if we were using that process instead of MIG. So MIG welding that whole system to where we're at now would be 3 times at least the amount of time if we were TIG welding it. So MIG's still fine. We have also painted all the welds because obviously the MIG wire is mild steel, everything else is stainless. There's arguments for and against welding stainless with mild, but in an exhaust application it's not going to have a problem. If you're doing food grade or medical, obviously you want to be using the right materials, but for an exhaust system it's really not going to give us any problems. So yeah, I think we're just going to pack it up for the day. I'll probably end up finishing this thing off camera, but yeah, you guys have seen a fair chunk of an exhaust system anyway. Understanding the bones of how to do it is the biggest thing. Getting the bends right is what takes the time. Like this bend here, this section took as long as making that midsection. So, because to that point it's all freestyled, but you're pretty critical on where you want to put your muffler. Also, muffler choice is quite hard these days. You don't have the range that used to be available. We got lucky where this particular muffler was available off the shelf with a center inlet and an offset outlet. So although it's not quite where we need it, it puts the tip a lot closer to the center of the rear bar outlet. These rear bars are unobtainium, so we don't want to go cutting it up. I wouldn't even know where to buy one other than Japan. And being that this is a 87 or a 86 model, I highly doubt you're going to come across 25 Cima rear bars or front bars just sitting around. So yeah, we are pretty mindful not to just go hacking this thing up. But we'll pack it up and wait till the flanders arrive. It's a new day, we're back on the Cima exhaust. We've got our flanges, they've finally arrived. Pretty stoked about that. This is actually a spare one. I ordered more than I needed now because I'd rather have more than not enough. And I've already slipped the new one in. We do have to clean this out a little bit. Some of the different brands use slightly different OD tubing, so just run a die grinder burr around the one that we're actually using to get a nice press fit, and that's allowed us to kind of tweak it and move it around a little bit in the flange so that we can clock the muffler and the tip in the exact right spot. We've just got it back on the stands, so I'm going to actually start from the back and work my way forward. So we're going to put the exhaust tip section back on this and tack it to the muffler first. Then we're going to move forward once we position it in the exact spot we want, and we'll tack it, but then we'll actually put a few decent welds on that flange before we remove it and do the final weld, because we want to really make sure that that flange locks into the correct spot. So basically we'll do tip, flange, weld this thing completely. Obviously we'll have to take that off the car to do it, but then we'll put it back on the car and do all of our hangers last, so that we can make sure, same thing, that they're in the exact right spot that we want them. We can probably still fudge it a little bit on the flange. They both have slotted bolts, so we can move it around a little bit, even if it does move around after it's welded. So yeah, we want to get the tip, basically we just want to make sure the tip's centralized in the rear bar. We're also not going to weld the tip completely to the muffler. Adam is planning on either changing the bumper bars or adding a lip kit to it. So I'm not going to spend 20 minutes welding it all the way to the muffler, only to have to cut it off and potentially modify it later. So we're just going to put some pretty large tacks on it, just so it'll stay there. Obviously this far back post muffler, you're not going to get an exhaust leak either. So we'll yeah, zip it all up and be on our way. Brrr. Obnoxious RB noises. Brrr. It's like a Rocky. Sweet positioning jig. Forever having too short of a cable. We haven't shown it on camera, but I have ground off a fair chunk of paint off this rail here so that we can weld the hanger to. Heaps of people try and weld over paint. I've been guilty of it in the past as well. It never really works that well. Some people try and wind up heaps more amps or volts than they need depending on the welder they've got. But we've just given it a quick whiz off. In here it's pretty tight in the chassis rail, so I've got a little air-driven belt sander that's pretty handy for that sort of gear. It's just a cheapie, like they're available. Most tool stores will sell you one for under $100, and the belts are quite cheap too, so it's a good little tool to get into weird spots. And I've even seen people cleaning up inside engine valleys in V8 engines to try and get better oil flow, so there's plenty of uses for that tool. I've used it tons of times to get me out of a bind, or even deburring inside stuff, whatever. It's super handy, so I would recommend to get one of those little air-driven belt sanders. We've got all our hanger positioning finalised. You may or may not have noticed I just put some tacks on either end of both of the hangers. I didn't go crazy with the welding on that because it will burn this hanger. So I've just quickly tacked that. We do have to remove the diff back section again to final weld that hanger on. So while that's off, I'm going to run a little bit more of a bead on the hanger positions just to lock that rubber mount in more or less. This hanger primarily supports it in a linear motion. We need to also support it in a crossway on this particular hanger, so I'm just going to do a bit more of a tack weld just to build up some material to lock the hanger in. You don't want to go too crazy with your welds though, because it can make it really hard to get this off, particularly if you're trying to do it by yourself. So I like to build a little bit up but not go too crazy. The round bar that we're using on this particular system is 10mm or 3/8. And the holes in the hangers are 12mm, so currently it's quite a loose fit. So yeah, we're going to leave it a loose fit where it's actually sitting, but yeah, try and lock it right next to it so that it doesn't have a side-to-side motion on this rear section, because we've got it quite close to the heat shield on this passenger side, so we don't want to have it touching and rattling because that's annoying. But we're going to unbolt it, do the final weld, do some tacks and paint it, call it done. Well, that's us pretty much done for the exhaust system on this Cima. We've painted the back section black just to give it a bit more of a stealth appearance from the back of the car. It's not a sleeper, but it's also not a race car, so we're just trying to make it look kind of factory, just black's nice and simple. Obviously, the whole exhaust system was stainless, so it's pretty bright silver. So we've just kind of touched the back up with black, and we've just painted everything else silver as we've gone through the system. Obviously, we mentioned previously in the video that we MIG welded this with mild steel, so we've painted all the welds, and apart from that, everything else is stainless 304, so it should live on a long time under this car, especially now that we've tucked it above the lowest point of the vehicle. It shouldn't drag or get caught on the road. This thing is quite low. It's right on the 100mm legal ride height. So yeah, obviously anything that's hanging below is going to get knocked off on speed bumps or driveways or whatnot. So yeah, we've tried to tuck it right up. We've actually changed the exhaust path a lot compared to the way Nissan ran the system on this car. Some of the stuff we had to change due to the diameter change of the pipe. Originally this had a 2-inch system, which was tiny for an RB25 turbo. You could hear this thing was choking just driving it previously. So 3-inch with obviously the wastegate's plumbed back because it's a standard style turbo, so there's plenty of flow to grow if we do want to put a high flow turbo or a front mount or something on it later, maybe a Haltech. I'm not sure what Adam's plans are long term, but I'm sure this isn't the last you see of this Cima, so we'll pack it up and we'll see you guys next time. Sounds pretty good.